Hi, I'm Luke Filson, and welcome to Cameron's Cryptid Classroom. On today's show, he's talking about the Meshekenabek. So here he is, our favorite hero on earth, Uncle Cam.
What is happening, friends? And thank you so much for joining me here on episode 2 of Cameron's Cryptid Classroom. Big ups to Little Fizzy, again, for hooking me up with a solid intro. And I hope you like this setup. I don't know what I'm doing. Is this supposed to be the creepy lighting? Is this creepy podcast lighting? Is this creepy story time lighting? I don't know. We'll see how this turns out. Y'all know as well as I do, I'm winging it, so hopefully this all comes together. So, that being said, yes, like Luke alluded to, we're talking about, and I'm going to always be referring to this because this is a heck of a name, right? The Meshekenabek, from Indiana. Now, the main reason, I'm going to clarify before we go down the road, the main reason I started not only with Indiana is I have a really good friend of mine who is from Indiana. And he and his wife are no longer living in Indiana. And so I wanted to do this as something. They talked to me after the first one, and they liked it. And I wanted to kind of surprise them with this. This is something in case he's a little homesick, you know, things like that. But another reason, too, is it's a lake monster. And look around. There's no Big Fizzy. There's no Kylomite. You know how he gets with lake monsters, right? Why does he get it's just funny, right? Is he gets annoyed with lake monsters. But he loves them. But they annoy him. So anyhow, the reason, and I'm going to try this mic this time. I'm trying different microphones. Like we said, we go grow and learn together. So this is what we're doing. This story that I'm covering about the Meshekenabek. So let's jump in. We have to back up a ways. Just like the last one, just like on the Schnelligeist, we have to go all the way back to 1827. In 1827, there was a treaty signed in Indiana with the Potawatomi Indians, the natives there, and they were going to have a corn mill, and they needed a body of water, and there was several little lakes. So the state of Indiana decided to dam up a certain lake there, or a certain river system, and flood those lakes, turning it all into one. That lake is Lake Manitou. And Manitou is roughly, I think, 55 to 60 foot deep. It's where it is. Of course, it's all man-made, right? And almost immediately after this was flooded and this lake, full-bodied lake, was created, these tails of this great serpent started appearing. And the natives started warning the European settlers about, staying around that area, that there's a creature in the water that might take you off, and they would not go to certain areas of the lake. They would not collect water. They would not camp close to it. There's been a lot of theories tossed around about this lake monster. One of them was that it was already something living in one of the smaller lakes. One of them was that it was a curse, or it was a shaman that had put some sort of hex or some sort of something on the lake, had brought about this creature. I guess you could say as a way of maybe defense from the white European settlers. Whatever. I mean, whatever angle we decide to go down, it could have been, either or. Who really knows, right? Either way, this thing had taken up residence in this lake. Now, the funny thing about it is it wasn't like there was a lot of documented sightings, a lot of things going on prior to this, right? Like they build this lake, like the smaller lakes. There weren't a lot of sightings in the smaller lakes, if any, like nothing. It really wasn't reported till they filled this whole thing up. Now, apparently the lake name itself, Manitou, in the Potawatomi language could mean either evil spirit or good spirit. So it means both. It can be described as either or. So again, was it a shaman that put it in there, and in their vision it was good, and they spread these out to try to scare them? Was it nothing more than stories? Well, that was the legend that rolled along for the longest time, right? And so what's wild is that the Potawatomi natives in that area, they hunted and fished all around all of this whole area until the large lake kind of grew. And then that's whenever they started backing off. They started noticing there was a problem, or at least something that they had thought was a problem. There are stories about that tribe members said that they would never bathe in that lake. They would never canoe that lake. They wouldn't fish, like I said, in certain areas of that lake. It's almost like they knew something, again, that we didn't. So, jumping forward, the workers, while they were working, building the dam and doing the work there, as it was coming up and they did all this, they didn't really report anything crazy. They swam, they played, they brought their families, they did everything. It was part of the deal. It wasn't until a little bit of time passed and they started working on the mill for the natives that's when the workers of the mill started saying, hey, we've seen something strange swimming out there, and we're not sure what it is. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's undulating. It's also serpent-like. We're not knowing what we're seeing, right? So we have no idea what this is. Maybe the natives are onto something. They've all heard these stories, and so that's kind of what they had believed along this. So finally, there's a group of people working on this, a surveyor and a group of builders working on the mill and the landscape around the area. I think they were doing some work on getting supplies to the mill so they could continue to build it. They reported seeing something that they said was over 30 foot long in this lake. Said it was very dark in color. It had a horse-like head. There we are again, horse-like head. Cows are horse heads, right? We always seem to. Of course, you think about it, that's the only real animal in 1827, unless you were highly educated, that you may have seen that you could relate to this. There wasn't documentation like there is now on all the different extinct and extant species. So they start saying this is what they're seeing. It's got a long neck, a horse head, 30-foot long body. They said, of course, not only have they seen it surface, but they've seen the back end as it dives and goes under. So they start telling each other these stories, and then it goes from Rochester, which is where the lake is, to a place called Logansport, which is like 25, 30 miles away from the lake. The stories have already spread. So people are all chattering about this in this year. So it's got to make you start thinking, right? What is going on? Are they doing this to build the buzz? They want people like they do now to come in, like we talked about with the fake newspapers. What are we doing with all of this information? This keeps growing and growing and growing. Nobody really says a lot about it because there's no real hard evidence. There's these stories. It's not until it's like 10 and a half years after the lake, I guess, was finished and these stories started coming out that the local blacksmith of the area there at Lake Manitou decides, I better come forward and tell them what I've seen. Now, what's funny about this coming forward business with that is that a blacksmith is a very integral part of the city, right? Especially back then. He's the man that sharpens things, repairs things, and builds things. If you don't have the tools, the blacksmith makes you the tools, right? He keeps things going. And it was a very, very structural part of a community is a solid, good blacksmith. So when you have a good blacksmith, when you have a man that is respectable, straight, arrowed, this is what it is, he finds himself more in city politics, if you will. He becomes what we refer to now as a pillar of the community, right? That's what he becomes. Well, this blacksmith was named Mr. Lindsay, was no different. He was a pillar of the community. So when this initially happened, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should come forward or if he should wait. So he waited. He took his time. He took 10 and a half, nearly 11 years before he comes forward to talk about what he saw while there. So what he goes on to say is he said, this was in 1938. He starts saying how he watched this creature, right? Right after this lake is opened and everything's going and he's down there. He said he's looking out onto the water. It's about 200 foot out. And he said something comes out of the water, raises its head. He would estimate 4 foot out of the water and proceeds to swim, undulating, right, as it's working its way around the lake. He goes on to say that the body of this creature was very serpent-like in appearance, very slick, very smooth moving, all of this. He said what was interesting was its eyes faced forward, much like a predator, looking forward, not on its sides. And he goes on to say that the head was 3 foot wide. He goes, Now, what I don't know about this Wyatt is, does he mean 3 foot width, eye to eye, or is he talking front to back? If you're talking 3 foot eye to eye, then the head must be 6 foot long, right? Like otherwise it's just a cube or a big ball. But what he reported was long necked, dark color, grayish black, except this one he said had a cow's head, not the horse head we heard before, but the head like a cow on it. He goes on to say, which is strange, is he said there were spots on this animal that you could see that were large and had a yellowish tinge to them. So the contrast was very, very distinct on its skin. Now that could have easily been, caused by the light shining through the water. We've all seen the funky reflections. You think you see something on a fish when you're on a dock. It's clear. You're like, what is that? And then you see it's just a regular fish. It's just the way the light works or the water and the light work together as a kind of a strange filter. So what he said is the blacksmith, Mr. Lindsay, goes on to say he watches this creature, smooth and fluid, move around, its head looking around. He said this took place for about 2 or 3 minutes. He said finally, instead of diving like you would expect, it just slowly lowered like a submarine. From what I read the stories, is it just kind of slowly went down till it was out of sight, right? Kind of like the periscope on a sub if it was left up diving. So he said the surface water goes back perfectly still. That was that. Now his shop is built on part of this lake, so he could watch, and that was where he was watching from. Hence the reason he didn't want to say anything about it. He did not want to be embroiled in all this madness. So he just goes back to work like nothing's going on. Again, like we said, over 10 years later before he's finally willing to tell his story. Well, after that, more people started coming forward. Man, I was kind of the same way. Now, that could be the whole let's jump on the bandwagon, monkey see, monkey do ideas. Or it could be nobody else was willing to discuss it until he was willing to discuss it. So that's exactly what happened. More stories start coming forward. More people start talking about this encounter of the Meshekenabek as it comes up. Well, then there's a story came out a little bit later of 2 men, family members, last name of Robinson. They were on the water fishing in a boat, little rowboat, right? They're rowing out there. Said they thought they saw a school of fish shimmering and messing with the water, right? The way they kind of all school around the top of the water. That's what they thought they had seen. So as they're watching it, this creature comes up out of the water, and it's bigger than their rowboat. They said whatever this thing was is relatively larger than what we expected. Now they see the disturbance clearly. They see this head of this thing come up out of the water. They kind of panic. Well, who can blame them? What do? They're rowing, right? Boy, can you imagine the fear in your body rowing? It just sounds terrifying. And this thing is following. And it follows them all the way back. Now, what's funny is they said, hey, look, we're watching it, and this thing looks like it has an intelligent look in its eye. And it is following them with intent. They row their butts off all the way back, get out, pull it ashore. That's when the thing stops. Now, what's funny is they said it's probably 30 or 45 foot off the shore. It's sitting watching. It watches them for a second, rolls back into the water, out of sight. Last they saw of it. Of course, like anything else, what do? We're going to have to go tell people. So they go to describe what they've seen. What they've seen is the exact same thing. Large undulating body, dark skin, animal-like head, animal-like horse or cow, large head on it. They didn't know what to do, right? They got back, the whole thing, they didn't know what they had just been in contact with. As they were more apt to discuss their story, they came out with more details. And the more details were that this thing caught them before they got to the shore. It circled the boat. As it circled the boat, it rocked the water in the boat. They said whatever it was large. That this thing popped up and stared at us from about 60 foot away, allowed us to row back to the boat, or back to the shore rather, and then it let us go. They said this thing felt like it wasn't trying to harm us. It was more like curious. And that was part of the story they'd kept to themselves for the first few weeks. They didn't want people to realize like maybe this thing is smart. maybe this thing is more intelligent than what people were willing to give it credit for. So, of course, people, they don't know what to do, right? So people start panicking like we do, and they start overreacting, and they get together as many boats and as many nets and as many fishermen as they can, and they hit this boat or this lake with a small country armada, right? The Indiana Navy paddles out onto this boat, onto this body of water, and they do what they can. They go crazy, right? Trying to find something. They can't find it. They really come back with nothing. Everything that they do, there's no result. They hunt this creature to no results. In the 1940s, finally, the reports start falling off. There's a few stories from time to time that come where people would say, hey, look, I was walking around the lake. I saw something. We were fishing. We were camping. I saw something here. Nothing as distinct as the very first time that it was reported. And then in 1849, they catch some fish out of there. And what they end up catching was what's known as a buffalo. It's kind of like a carp, right? Very large. From what I understand, this thing was enormous. Like, apparently it weighed a few hundred pounds. Like, it was massive. And they were like, well, there it is. They pulled this thing out. It's a big, massive buffalo. If you look them up, I can't remember the real scientific name. I don't remember what the actual fish is called. We've always called them buffalo. There's carp, like golden carp, yellow carp, and then the buffalo are always silver or lighter colored. And they, of course, they're built different than carp. They were always a lot thicker bodied. You know, the ones that you see are, where carp are big, but the buffalo were a little funkier built. And so they take this thing to the neighboring town, Logansport, and they put it on display there. Maybe this could be the Meshekenabek, right? Then again, later on, like almost 40 years after that, they catch like a giant, I believe it was a catfish, a spoonbill catfish. They drag a spoonbill catfish, which is basically a paddlefish. That's what they called them then, the American paddlefish, if you look that up. It's kind of like a sturgeon, right? It's just a funky-looking creature. And we all know how many times the sturgeons or the funky-looking creatures have been blamed for lake monsters. So they start talking like, hey, man, this thing here is huge. It's over 100 pounds. Maybe it's that. You also have to imagine that the people that might have seen the creature in 27, we don't know their age, but by the time they are in the, 1880s, they're probably passed away. So how would they refute it if that's not what they had seen and people wanted to latch onto that? But one of the strange things about it was these tails started falling off. Like we said, after it was there for a little bit, after that little bit, it was gone. And then we get a few large fish caught, but nobody ever got to the true tail or to find the ending of the Meshekenabek. Now, I will read you this here about the great serpents. It said it is strange that the Potawatomi tribes say that the Meshekenabek was just one creature of many water spirits that dwelt in those lakes, and that they believe that you weren't witnessing one creature, that you might have been witnessing several creatures, and that they were very dangerous to people, and that they would kill people if you got too close to the water, and that they believe that a lot of the stories, early stories, the reason you didn't have so many was that the animal itself, the great serpent, took them into the lake. People that went vanishing, people that disappeared. It would be a fun thing to do, to dig in, to see if there was a lot of missing people reports in that area. But you also have to imagine, I can't imagine there being very accurate bookkeeping of missing people at that time. So that is the tale of one of Indiana's lake monsters. I say one because there's several. If you're interested in the others, I'm going to be covering it on an Elite show. There's several more little lake monsters from Indiana that I'd like to talk about. So, again, thank y'all all so very much for joining us for the Cryptid Classroom. Use that information. If you're from Indiana, drop a little comment down here in the comment section. Let me know if you've been to Lake Manitou. Let me know if you've seen anything or heard anything strange, or what the local folklore might still tell of it. It would be a fun lake to go visit. It'd be an awesome time to go fish. Maybe the Meshekenabek is not still there, so we'll just have to see. Again, thank y'all so much. Hope you enjoyed this. I love doing these. I love bringing these to y'all. I have some interesting ones coming up. We're going to probably do some. I was going to film this around a campfire. I was going to do this outside and make it very interesting. But I thought, you know what? I need to pick one more in the woods, something a little more disturbing, a little more creepy if I'm going to be in the woods. I should have filmed this one on the lake. Problem is the weather is a little off today. Real windy. So, yeah, it would not have been a good one. So, there's more coming up. I'm really glad. I'm very thankful that y'all all support us, and I'm really happy that y'all joined me here today. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next week on another episode of Cameron's Cryptid Classroom. I don't really have a cool catchphrase. I don't really have anything fun to say besides stay out of trouble, y'all, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy. Give somebody a hug. We'll see you next week. Peace, y'all.